Here. Residents and taxpayers of the borough are permitted to comment on current matters of concern or agenda items which are before council this evening. If you would like to address council this evening, we ask that you please stand at the microphone, give your name, spell your last name, and give your address so you will be properly identified for the minute record. Each speaker will be limited to 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Sorry, but as an alternative, written comments can be submitted through the public comment section by 12 noon today. We did have one comment. A letter was submitted by Ann and Ken Fetterman concerning pickleball, and we will be addressing that issue. And as a matter of fact, we have established a date to have a meeting with the residents and the pickleball players here at the borough, and we agreed to that next Tuesday at 5:30 here in the borough. And we will be sending out emails to those who might be interested specifically. Okay, so we do this now. Okay, so we have on our list, I think Charles or Phoebe Horton.
Horton, 1654 Farmington Court. We're now into the 3rd year of Verizon and SBA's 3rd attempt to ram a giant cell tower down the throats of the people who would live near the golf course. It was initially going to be a 150-foot tall eyesore. Then we heard 180 feet, and now tonight from SBA, we heard 200 feet. We have several questions about this. Number one, what happened to the Technology Advisory Committee, which Mr. Ebner, you advised me in an email, there's now the Technology Committee, which is not the same as the Technology Advisory Committee. It is very unclear to us why a borough this size has 2 different committees with almost identical names doing the identical purpose of boosting the Verizon cell tower plans. And what praiseworthy reason there would be to replace the Technology Advisory Committee with the Technology Committee with no public agenda posted for its first meeting. That's a question in my email that you did not answer as to why there is still no public agenda posted for that first meeting in violation of the Sunshine Law. At the meeting that you had at 6 o'clock, we heard more about SBA's plans. We heard that the Borough Council has been, quote, reaching out to cell phone carriers. That's an interesting development, which also is not mentioned in any agenda or minutes of this Technology Committee, which appears to have just been established. Again, I would welcome hearing the praiseworthy reason for Verizon's cronies to be replacing the Technology Advisory Committee with the Technology Committee reaching out to cell companies what seems to be rather furtively. Mr. Parks, you mentioned updating the CELDO. I think that's an excellent idea. I think we need to revisit the zoning ordinance. And while you're doing it, we need to revisit the zoning change that was pushed through at SBA's behest on Verizon's first try at this tower. The one that basically drew an arrow to Clover Hill Golf Course by saying, well, it has to be a 50-acre plot. We now find from the plans that it would be all the way at one side of the 50-acre lot, the golf course, destroying property values for myself, my family, and many other families nearby. We know from the RJM wireless study, for which Franklin Park paid $24,000 and then made almost impossible to find on its website, which is rather interesting if you didn't specifically search for it. And anyone listening, try finding it. Go to the franklinparkborough.us website, try to find it without using the search engine. We know from that study that there are several other viable alternatives, that there is no need to destroy our property values in order for Verizon to improve its coverage. Verizon has stated that this is a cheaper way. Okay. Is it Franklin Park Borough's duty to provide Verizon with the cheapest answer to its business challenges? Is it Franklin Park's Borough to help Verizon make up lost ground to T-Mobile and AT&T? I was not aware that that was something that Franklin Park Borough was responsible to do, because of course it isn't. Your responsibility is to us as your constituents, your taxpayers. Verizon is not your constituent or your taxpayer. You are not obligated.
This has absolutely nothing to do with Verizon, Dr. Horton.
Really, because Verizon's name has come up specifically at numerous times during this. If you look at the
As have all
TAC's
the-
minutes,
as
Mr.
have the other
Mislinski, I
two.
have the floor. Verizon's name came up numerous times in the TAC's minutes. If you look at the TAC's minutes from its inception in February of 2021, Verizon, over and over again, the name Verizon shows up repeatedly. The TAC invited 4 different people from Verizon, plus their property acquisition specialist, to come to their March 2021 meeting. We don't see anything about T-Mobile. We don't see anything about AT&T, but over and over again, we see Verizon. So if it has nothing to do with Verizon, why does Verizon's name show up over and over and over again and the other cell carriers don't? I'll give you my last 18 seconds. You can respond.
Thank you. I'll start with your first point. Council has 8 standing committees that are constituted with council members. One of those committees is the Technology Committee. We decided to establish a citizen advisory committee called the Technology Advisory Committee for dealing with this and other specific technology issues throughout the borough. We constituted that committee. This was one of their main priorities, and they finished their work when we did the RJM study, which now passes off to council because that is an advisory committee. They cannot do anything. They can only
Which
make
has existed
recommendations.
for over 5 years, by the way.
Thank you. The reason that Verizon shows up in some of the early minutes is because Verizon came forward with a proposal. That's why their name shows up. AT&T. I have the floor now, Dr. Horton. AT&T did not come forward with a proposal at that time, nor did T-Mobile. Now that we have the RGM study, we have asked 4 major cell phone towers to take a look at it and to give us their feedback. We've met with 2 of them now. SBA was tonight. We met with Crown Castle a few weeks ago. They will not do business solely with Verizon. They rent the tower to at least the top 3 carriers, space on the tower. Saldo and zoning, absolutely. We always need to take a look at that, tweak it, and make it better. The website, I can't address that. I will look at it and see why it's so difficult to find. But your obsession with Verizon and the fact that we are somehow shills for them is offensive. Your constant inferences and outright statements that there are backroom deals going on are offensive. Everything we do is done in the light of day. We Zoom the meeting. We advertise the meetings. The public is available it's open to every meeting except for our executive sessions. So I understand that this is an issue that's very important to you. It's very important to us too. Several of us are first responders. There's no coverage in the borough, in certain parts of the borough for first responders. There have been several accidents right outside my neighborhood. And you can't call emergency services from your cell phone. In this day and age, cell phones are a utility, and it is one of our responsibilities to make sure that the residents have access to all utilities. That's it for me.
Thank you. Further comments? All right. Next is Mr. Philip Lope. Lope?
My name's Phil Lope. I represent David Locust. I want to speak to the motion. It's motion 3.
Yes, sir.
On your agenda,
Right.
and I can speak now or I can wait until you,
Go ahead.
right now. On behalf of Dave Yokas, we've made an application to the borough for a permit to correct a structure and turn it into medical offices, 4 medical offices. Medical offices are a permitted use in the R4 zoning district where this property is located. We meet all of the general and specific requirements of your zoning ordinance. We appeared before the planning commission and they recommended that it be approved, the conditional use permit, to move forward. And the reason they did that is because there is absolutely no legal basis to deny this application. So what we're asking you to do tonight is the same thing that the planning commission did. Approve the application for a conditional use permit to move forward with the construction of the medical offices at the Warrendale Bain site. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Nick Barone.
Nick Barone, Barone, 2400 Rustic Ridge Drive. I'm not an attorney, so bear with me. I live there. I just went over some things I was looking at and concern conditional uses. Chapter 212, Article 1803. First paragraph. The proposed use will not alter the established character and the use of the neighborhood or district in which it is located and will not substantially impair the use of development of adjacent properties. Well, we're all residential. We have old homes. We have new homes. We have good neighbors. We have good tranquility. We feel that Mr. Yokas, from day one when he bought that property, has tried to shove some type of commercial use, whether it's apartments, whether it's business offices. Now it's this medical building. It doesn't fit in our area. We have houses all around. It's like in the center. We've got past his property going up the hill. It's all kind of homes below us, around us. This is a residential district. It doesn't fit. Also, I think it would create a problem traffic wise because there's a lot more things that could be developed and they are going to be developed. And I think I brought this up at one of the meetings that you may have to redesign the road for a traffic turning area. Because as soon as you put that business here, you're going to hamper traffic flow. So we get a little bit of worry because we got to keep fighting this gentleman all the time. Nobody likes to do that. I have nothing against Mr. Yokas, but we have our investments there and we want to keep it the way it is. So this is why I'm here to ask you people to deny this request by Mr. Yokas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next is Elizabeth Fay. All right. The minutes of the February 15th, 2023 pre-meeting, the February 15th, 2023 regular meeting, and the March 1, 2023 work session minutes were given to the mayor and council. Are there any additions or corrections? Hearing none, can we have a motion, please?
Move the minutes of the February 15th, 2023 pre-meeting, the February 15th, 2023 regular meeting, and the March 1st, 2023 work session be approved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any discussion? That's the wrong order. Treasurer's financial report, Mrs. Crane.
Thank you, Mr. President. The general fund revenues for the month of February totaled $636,358. Year-to-date total revenues are $1,091,905. That represents approximately 9.86% of the 2023 total budget. Conversely, the general fund expenditures for the month of February totaled $517,198. Year-to-date total expenditures are $1,317,358. That represents approximately 9.95% of the 2023 total budget. That concludes the treasurer's report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mrs. Crane.
Move the February treasurer's financial report be accepted as read.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Police report, Mayor O'Keefe.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. For the month of February, our Franklin Park Police has 683 calls for service resulting in 9 arrests, 1 DUI, 1 drugs, 2 disorderly conduct, 1 simple assault, 1 retail theft, 1 aggravated assault, 1 harassment, and 1 altered documents and plates. We issued 83 citations and 300 warnings. Chief Healy received an amazing email tribute to Officer Amanda Bednock. It came to him from her captain during her police service in Dallas, Oregon. The email addresses a homeless man who is on his way to recovery. He specifically mentions Amanda as a vital part of his recovery and would like her to know about his success. This was pretty typical of Amanda, as she was always caring and compassionate with the people she dealt with. I wanted you to be aware that she is still leaving impressions on people, even though she works 3,000 miles away. Please share this with her and know that you have a great officer who cares for the community she serves. Additionally, Chief Healy received an email of sincere gratitude to Officer Brian Blakely. It states, I want to extend my sincere gratitude and appreciation for the effort that Officer Blakely provided on behalf of my son and myself for a fraudulent case that has impacted our family for over 5 months. Officer Blakely was extremely thorough and tireless as he pursued angles that I never thought of or that I was able to handle. In addition, his communication with me throughout the process was exceptional. Quite honestly, I have been nothing but impressed with his digital fraudulent knowledge. His experience has allowed me to realize what a tremendous advocate your local police are in a situation such as mine. Officer Blakely is a true asset to the Franklin Park Borough. For me personally, my thanks go out to all Franklin Park officers. For what I just read about Amanda and Brian, it's typical of all of our courageous police officers. I am very proud to serve as their mayor. That completes the police report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mayor.
Recommend the police report be filed with the police secretary.
Fire report, Mr. Mizlinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. For February 2023, the fire company responded to 16 calls, 4 fire alarm or smoke detector activations, 3 residential building fires, including mutual aid with McCandless and Marshall Township, 3 vehicle accidents with general cleanup, 2 down power lines, 1 cooking fire, 1 overheated electric motor, 1 medical assist where we assisted the EMS, and 1 dispatched and canceled en route. We were assisted by other fire companies twice, and we assisted other fire companies 6 times. Year-to-date fire calls are 38. For the month of February, the company expended 387 volunteer man-hours, and the year-to-date, 852 volunteer man-hours. End of report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Mizlinski. Builders inspectors report, Mr. Phillips.
Construction report for February 2023. 17 permits were issued for the month. 1 single-family dwelling, 1 addition, 2 remodeling, 2 decks, 1 fence, 1 commercial occupancy, 2 signs, 5 miscellaneous. Total value of construction for the month is $576,881. Total fees collected were $8,000.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Borough Council held an executive session on February 15th, 2023 to discuss a potential property purchase, list potential litigation, police personnel and carriage lane litigation, and Borough Council held an executive session on March 1, 2023 to discuss police personnel, a police grievance, list potential litigation, and Carnegie Lane potential, carriage lane potential litigation. Period. Full business, motion 3.
Move to approve conditional use application number CU 22-12-05 submitted by David Yokas for approval of a medical office use on the property located at 2568 Wexford Main Road in the R4 zoning district, contingent upon compliance with the building inspector / zoning officer's staff report dated February 22nd, 2023.
Second,
Second.
any discussion?
Mr. President, I just had a few things I wanted to cover.
Sure.
Okay. We understand the history of this has been long, and we've heard from a number of our residents about their concern about approving this conditional use application. If we did approve it, I wanted to make it clear to the applicant that there are certain timing requirements that are required in our ordinance. At this point, I'd like to have our solicitor read them into the record for applicants. That would give them.
Certainly, I called them up. This is the provision in section 1802 subsection C on expiration of approval. It states the grant of a conditional use shall expire 2 years after the date of the Borough Council's written decision unless 1, the applicant has applied for and obtained a building permit and commenced construction. Or 2, in a case where the conditional use does not require the issuance of a building permit, the applicant has applied for and obtained an occupancy permit and has commenced the use, which is the subject of the conditional use approval. In this case, a building permit will be required. This is a standard that is in the ordinance with respect to the length of this conditional use approval. It is not something that can be changed to go to less time in terms of a year or 6 months or anything like that. It is a standard right out of the ordinance.
Okay, I'd also like to have Mr. Phillips read the conditions of his staff report because they will apply. And just so everyone knows what kind of restrictions we've set here, what kind of, there's a little bit of timeline stuff in here as well, but you have a copy?
It's in our electronic packet. Tim, you don't have your computer with you.
Okay, so the conditions that were specified in my staff report for council to approve this application by is that the applicant shall comply with all provisions of the Code of the Borough of Franklin Park and laws of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and obtain all permits required by law. Number 2, conditions of approval of land development plans shall be completed before any work can begin on the site. 3, the structure shall comply with all current PA UCC regulations and requirements. 4, the use is for outpatient use only, no overnight patients permitted. 5, proof of approval of sanitary sewage must be provided for the use. 6, a PennDOT HOP must be submitted for the driveway access.
It's not a touchscreen. It's not that big. Oh, no.
You want mine? Page 77 if you're in the packet.
7, a preliminary and final land development application must be submitted along with engineered plans in accordance with Chapter 184 subdivision and land development as necessary for the proposed site improvements within 180 days of this conditional use approval. 8, no more than 4 separate medical offices shall be located as tenants on the property. 9, no business offices shall be located on the property. 10, only ground level dark sky lighting shall be installed on the site. 11, a minimum of 100% screening at 6 feet in height, beginning at the front setback line along the western side property, extending to the rear property line and installed along the rear property line to full length. 12, a zoning variance may be obtained for any existing encroachment of structure into a required yard area due to the change of use to the property. And that's the end of the conditions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Phillips. I think a lot of those were developed because of feedback that we've received from residents and neighbors. One specific, I know that there's been a lot of talk over sewage, and number 5 does say proof of approved sanitary sewage must be provided for the use, and that would be required before any building permits were issued. Yes.
That would be worked through separately by the sanitary. There's another avenue such as online sewage.
Okay.
And that would be handled through the health department.
Okay. Thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Council? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Two opposed? No. All in favor was aye.
Can we do a roll call, Mr. President? I think we might need a roll call.
Okay, let's do a roll call.
Yeah.
Both? In favor. Yeah.
Aye, in favor.
Opposed?
Favor.
In favor.
Motion passes.
We will issue a notice of written decision tomorrow, which will just be the one-page letter. Copy will go to members of the public that attained party status during the public hearing. Appeal period is 30 days from that written notice. So that does start the clock on the other requirements for the submission of the land development plan, as well as the life of the conditional use. We can provide written findings of facts and conclusions of law in the event of an appeal, and would need to because this has been a contested application.
Okay. Mr. Yunker, would you summarize resolution number 1323-2023?
Yes, this is resolution number 1323 of 2023 as amended. It is a resolution of the Borough of Franklin Park, Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, granting preliminary and final subdivision and land development approval to RRG Franklin Park LLC for LPF 22-08-02 regarding the Cardinal Ridge Townhouse Plan located at 2570 Alden Drive with conditions. As noted, this has been amended from when it was originally introduced in January and tabled in February. It has been updated to reflect the submission of revised plans, the re-review by Planning Commission, an updated engineer letter, and I believe a new status report might be the same. That was February 8th. The engineer's letter is now dated March 6, 2023. It also has eliminated the 2 requested modifications for slope disturbances, and only the intersection modification remains in this draft or this resolution as amended. And you do have, looks like, materials at your place We are not in a public hearing. Gary's here. We'll get to that later, but you may discuss or hear a presentation from the applicant. Looks like this is dated today, so this is not something from the past, although it may have been reviewed with the planning commission previously. What's sitting here? March 15th, 2023? Well, they were at our place when we came out today, so I'm not sure.
Oh,
Okay.
Okay.
It looks like a duplicate.
The same.
Okay. Understood.
Identify myself. I'm Attorney Anthony Cosgrove. Been here the last couple of months with you guys. We have Steve Victor, our landscape architect here. We also have Tyson Miller, who's our stormwater engineer as well, if you wanted to ask any questions. At this point, we have a clean borough engineer letter, a clean staff report letter, favorable recommendation from planning. We are in complete compliance with your ordinances, other than the modification, which is simply physical impossibility that precludes us from strict conformance. So I believe therefore we fall well within the basically a patent undue hardship for us. But I'll stop talking. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer.
Thank you. And yes, we appreciate the ability and the willingness to work through these final issues that came up when the modification for the slope disturbance was changed, resulting in the detention tank plan. We have received a report from the Planning Commission, understand and have copies of their draft minutes. I will turn it back over to the chair and the president, because I'm not conducting a public hearing.
And if I can, Mr. President, I just want to say the conditions imposed, recommended by Planning Commission, we are completely on board with. We're accepting of those. So I just want to.
All right, so we need motion for.
Move to reconsider and adopt resolution number 1323-2023 as amended, granting preliminary and final subdivision and land development approval to RRG Franklin Park LLC or LPF-22-08-02 regarding the Cardinal Ridge Townhouse Plan located at 2570 Alden Drive with conditions.
Second.
Second,
You. Any further discussion?
yes, Mr. President.
Right.
Just real quick, if we have the stormwater engineer here, and I think I know the answer to this, but I know that's been a controversial subject. The water leaving the southern end of this site will be unchanged from what it is today. Once the detention pond is built, the discharge comes out. It basically goes to the same physical spot where all the water from that end of the site currently goes to before we even begin any work. My question is, and there's a pipe shown on the drawing that will ultimately take that water somewhere. And it's not clear in my mind, and I don't even know if it's your responsibility to have investigated that, but I'm curious where that water, or do you know where that water is going to go? And is there any likelihood that there could be more of a buildup? And I realize that your tank is going to discharge it more slowly, so it shouldn't be any more flow, but I'd just like to get a little bit more of an understanding what's going to happen at that very southern end where the water discharges.
Let me start with that and then I
Sure.
can discuss the aspects of the storm release. Stephen Victor Wetzel Associates.
Yeah.
When Lord Lane was constructed, they installed that person who understood create those three lots, constructed a storm sewer at the upper end on the A1 property, and that's the one we are discharging into. And then that goes underneath and runs along Forest Lane. And at the end of Forest Lane, at the third house, the driveway veers off to the left. Pipe keeps going straight and discharges at that location.
Okay.
Yeah, and so Tyson Miller, KU Resources, just to elaborate so this essentially this question came up as part of the review from the engineer. And then we did a more detailed analysis of that pipe, what the pipe's capacity was. And as you pointed out, by virtue of the fact of the stormwater management that we're proposing, flows that will be coming off property will be less in the post-development condition as they are today. So
Okay.
again, I believe that that's been adequately addressed.
I also walked that community a couple of times, and if you came in from Nicholson Road and hit Alden, made a right and went down to the corner, there is stormwater down there that appears to go into, I believe, the start of the Fish Run discharge at the bottom. Physically, though, that's, 100, 200 feet or whatever away from where the end of this pipe ends at that third lot along Lorick Lane. Could those, and again, this is not within the scope of your work at all, but could that actually be piped to that point at some point in the future if the residents in that area chose to do so? And maybe that's a speculation you can't even answer, but.
I think I can answer that because I had that discussion with Ian Johnston.
Okay.
For property, that was the water goes over the surface. And early on, I said to her that was certainly a way to deviate surface running water to just carry it on down through the old ravine area.
Okay.
Yes, it is possible to extend the pipe through that area.
Okay. That's kind of what I thought from walking the streets, and I probably should have tried to get some of the existing stormwater maps for that whole development there, because there's another group of new homes, but.
Yeah, I would certainly just like to point out too, I mean, obviously we understand those concerns. It's an offsite issue. Yeah, I think you understand that. I just want to make it clear too.
Sure.
What I might recommend from my role as a solicitor in other municipalities, and Mr. Brett's sitting right next to you, can tell you all about what we're doing in Moon, which is we're taking over a lot of these drainage ways. And so the township is actually going in and putting that pipe and improving their drainage ways. And so that might be something that the borough considers doing, because stormwater is the hot issue that everybody's having. And so those are kind of the remedies that we've sought to use. So.
No, we're addressing it everywhere. I've actually got somebody going to dig my backyard up this summer and put in some stormwater stuff, because I've got a big spot half the size of this desk that won't dry up anymore. And it's probably something from when the house was built 40 some years ago, and it's just not flowing the way it was, like it's springs coming out of the hills. So I think a lot of us that live in the borough are addressing stormwater things personally,
Right.
as well as part of borough business. But
Yeah, there's grants available too. I mean, Mr. Brett and I are knee deep in taking over easements all across the township, and we have grants to do these projects. So, but to your initial question, yes, we are reducing the flowage of water coming off our sites.
okay, good. So I feel better about that, because even though I don't think you're changing the amount or the volume of water leaving, or maybe the flow rate will be a little less because you are going to be detaining some of it and releasing it over a longer period of time, it's still ultimately going to get to that same point that it's currently getting to before you begin the work. So at least if the residents, and I understand, listening to some of the previous public comment, some of the residents are saying it is a problem down there and it is wet. So at least there is an opportunity for something to be done, not part of what you're doing, but in the future to remedy that. So.
Yeah, and I will say too, I mean, the whole purpose of stormwater control, right, is to control it. And that's what we are doing. We are controlling what is now uncontrolled runoff. And with that, it's obviously going to improve the situation, because we're controlling an uncontrolled current feature.
All right. Appreciate you walking me through that. Thank you.
Whoever can best answer this. We heard anecdotal evidence by way of Amy Johnston's testimony during the hearing, I believe, that she undergoes periods where her adjacent property is actually dry. There are periods where it's wet, but it also is dry. One of the concerns that she voiced was that the water runoff plan for this particular development was designed so that the water would be released continuously, slowly into the adjacent properties. And so has anybody examined or investigated her claim that she has periods where she has dry areas on her property versus this kind of wet condition that she's complained about? Does anybody have any evidence one way or another about that?
So I'm going to let Steve talk to that, but I think there's two things that we can't confound, right?
Yeah,
So one is, and I think Steve did a good job pointing this out in January. Her property is a natural drainage way that we think probably her predecessor in title, not her, took action to fill in a lot of that drainage way. So a lot of the problems she's experiencing are self-imposed at this point. But Steve also did a good job at the planning commission. I think it's in that package you have. It shows that duration of time.
Mhm.
You know, she kind of was under the misconception that this is going to be a very prolonged release of water. There's a breakdown in terms of how many hours after a rain event. I think, what was it? After a 100-year storm, it's 36 hours.
Mhm.
Is that correct? Yeah. So, I mean, this is not days that this is going to be flooding her property. And the fact, or not flooding, I shouldn't say that. Just releasing slowly onto her property. And again, the whole point of controlling stormwater is to allow her property to actually absorb that water rather than getting rushed with a huge flow of water that it can't absorb and then just puddle up. So it's not a long duration of time that the water would be released. And so it actually works to help her property absorb what is going to go down the natural drainage way. But to your direct question, Steve can better.
As part of putting together prior documents, we looked, and the backyard area that she has is about a 20-acre watershed.
Mhm.
Our watershed is 5 acres.
Mhm.
So we are only a 1/4 of the contributor to it. So I think we're going to improve on the situation only because we can improve on our 1/4. The other 3/4, she's still going to get. I suspect her testimony is correct. She does have dry periods and she has wet periods, which I think is totally consistent with the fact that that's the drainage way. And when it rains, there's going to be 20 acres of water coming toward her.
Is the idea of the stormwater work that you're doing such that the water that's going to be released slowly is not going to have an impact on her property in such a way that she's now going to have her property be wet all the time? Was my question. Is that something that's been studied and concluded?
We believe that the release rates that what we have are such that it will not cause it to be any greater harm than what she currently is experiencing.
Those calculations too were shown in the stormwater management report that was reviewed by the borough engineer and accepted those conclusions. Because that is one of the requirements, is that we show that there would be no adverse impacts downstream. And so we showed that in the stormwater management report, and the engineer confirmed those calculations. So frankly, we hear Ms. Johnson's concerns. We obviously sympathize with Ms. Johnson's concerns. We aren't causing Ms. Johnson's concerns, nor are we impacting them to a detrimental effect. We're actually, as Steve said, slightly improving it all to the extent we can, because we're not the sole cause of, what the water going into that area. And frankly, that is a private property concern, and it can't not be something that the borough council really uses as any justification for review of this plan. It's not a public factor. It's not a public issue. If there was an issue and she had some concern, she could go through some private channels to try to alleviate that concern, but that's not something that really council can focus on, because we aren't violating any of the township ordinances, and our stormwater plan shows that in fact we are complying with the requirements for stormwater management.
But she lives in this area. She's one of our residents, and we are sitting here just to represent them, include her and include her family. So definitely our concern is more valid than your concern.
We also are property owners in the borough as well, and we have
Because you don't
Right.
live here, right? Do you?
I
Do you
not,
live in this area?
but my client owns the property in which we are trying to develop. So
I know. So that's why we take everybody's and the concern into the consideration. It's just like we are sitting here just to take care of the whole community. So not only like one or two, and all of them. So we need to take everything into the consideration. So this is my idea, and I think that is for everybody sitting in this borough council. So, and I don't believe that I don't think that it's, it's good for you to tell us what we need to do at this moment. So, and I believe that we are doing our best to help this community, to take care of this borough, to make sure every resident live happily and peacefully.
I mean, I understand the point, and we'll just say that the first step or to protect the community is to develop a saldo. It's not required. You don't have to have it. You can default to the counties, and to have a zoning ordinance, also not required. So I mean, that is how the borough, through the comprehensive plan process and then imposing ordinances to even make them go through this process to develop their property, is that a community-wide view, and we can't compel a developer to look so far downstream, because it's eventually you get down to the river and who knows what. But we do have requirements for how to address adjacent properties in terms of stormwater. But I do understand, Dr. Lee, your concern that we've heard from Ms. Johnston. I don't see her here this evening. I do see Bernie Avon may have a question online, who is directly adjacent. But the requirements are are in the ordinance. There's a review and a clean letter from the engineer that this plan meets those requirements, at least in terms of stormwater.
And if I may too, Mr. Solicitor, I would also point out that when such conditions and requirements are met, there is a legislative presumption that it is in then the general public welfare, the best interest of the general public welfare and safety. So the fact that we have shown compliance with your standards demonstrates that is, therefore, our plan is in the best interest of the general welfare and public safety. If that's not within, again, it is within Ms. Johnson's best interest, because we've shown that there's going to be no adverse impacts downstream. But if you still felt like it wasn't, she needs to then set forth something showing that our calculations and our report was incorrect, and that the borough engineer's review of that was also incorrect, which she has not. And so her speculation cannot be a basis that the council uses to.
So regarding the detention tanks, so the water still need to be released, right?
Yeah.
So at what kind of rate, just like, will it be constantly released to the adjacent property, or it will be like occasionally or something? Can I get education for that? Because I don't know much.
Maybe Tyson could explain to you, because we've told you what the release rate is for a 100-year storm, but that's a 1% probability. I think what we ought to do is have him explain to you what the release rate is for the 2-year storm, the 10-year storm, and a 50-year storm. So you can see that the time that we are releasing the water out of the tanks is not an extended period of time. It is a reasonable period following the storm event. So that's
Yeah, I apologize. I don't have all the rates here, but I can speak to at least the times, because I do have that with me. But just to give you the cliff notes on how stormwater modeling works. In this region, we model storms based on different recurrence intervals. The 1-year storm has a 1% chance of happening in any given year. The 100-year storm, in theory, has a 1 in 100 chance, 1% chance of happening in any given year. So, but those are all based on historic data. Those recurrence intervals are given certain rainfall amounts. So a 2-year storm has a rainfall amount of probably around 2.5 inches, somewhere in that area. 100-year storm is probably in the range of 5.5. And I apologize, I don't have the exact numbers, but just using general rates for the Western Pennsylvania. But we model that based on what's called a 24-hour storm. So it's assumed that 5 inches an hour, that 5 total inches or that 2 total inches occur over a 24-hour period. The way that this subsurface detention system works is that the peak of that storm, which happens basically at the midpoint of a 24-hour storm, so approximately at 12 hours is when 50% of the rainfall has fallen. So that's essentially the peak. It's a bell curve. And then from that point on, that's when our dewatering calculations occur. So in a normal storm without any control, the rain would start at midnight and be over at midnight the next day. That'd be a 24 hours. In our case, we're saying that the peak flow is happening at noon. So the rain started at midnight. The peak happens at noon. Our system is dewatering 36 hours from that point noon. So it would be midnight the second day. So it is extending that flow that's coming off the property, in this case, 24 hours longer than what the original storm is, but all of the rates are less than they were in the pre-development condition.
May I interrupt?
Sure.
Okay, I just thought about one occasion, like if the tank is releasing water, right, at the peak time, and at that time, it also started raining. So why did it cost like more water to that the adjacent property and cause more damage?
No, so again, we're
No, answer my question and why it doesn't cause like more damage. If it's raining, start raining, and then your tank reach the peak release time, so you definitely have quite a bit of water released, and then you have the water from the sky.
Because the tank's not full. In a 2-year storm, it doesn't fill the tank full. And so as your scenario is.
What is full or not, but the release rate will be peak, means you have quite a bit water released, right? Is that my understanding correct or wrong? Like, okay. Let's do math.
So
Okay.
the tank, whether it was a surface pond or whether it's a subsurface pond, in both cases, they have some kind of device that restricts the flow. And so that causes the water to back up, fill the pond, in this case, fill the tanks. So the volume of that tank, you think of it like a bathtub. It's filling out and slowly going through the drain. So, it's metering that water out, slowing that rate down so that, again, when you compare the peak rate from an uncontrolled site versus the peak rate after going through the stormwater system, going through the stormwater system has a lower peak rate. And by virtue of the fact that we're able to get positive infiltration here, we're also reducing the overall volume. So water, by holding that water back as opposed to just letting it run off the site and run into this pipe and down to the next stream, by holding that water back, it is allowing it that additional 36 hours to percolate into the ground. So that's why the overall volume amount is also less in the post development.
So have you any data to show, like, because since this detention tank has been used for many years, right? And have you done any research on like whether adjacent property of this tank will be exposed to less amount of water?
Detention tank is exactly the same as a detention basin, as to its function holding back the water. The release from the tank or
No, I'm sorry to interrupt that. I'm sorry, and I asked a specific question. And you just answer yes or no. Have your company done any research to show whether the adjacent and the property to the detention tank will be exposed to less water or storm water or something like that? Have you got any data to support it that you are?
Your ordinance established.
No, I ask you, if you haven't done that, tell me like, no, I haven't done that. That's okay. That's the also answer.
Yeah.
You do not find today, because I ask you specific question and you just answer yes or no. That's it. And if I have more question, I will ask. And if you don't have the data to support, because we all like need to build our kind of knowledge based on based on research, based on the science, based on the data. And if you don't have this one, you can directly tell me like, yeah, I don't have that data and I don't know. And I can say something, but I may not have enough, evidence to support that.
Yeah. So, let me answer that.
Yes or no, please.
Let me answer that two different ways. So yes, there's a whole study, a whole field of hydrology.
Please, and the man interrupt. Yeah. And my question is very specific.
Yes, me personally, I have at least a half a dozen stormwater facilities that have post-construction stormwater monitoring on them that basically validates the calculations that we have provided in the report. if that answers your question.
No,
So-
not exactly. And I
Sounds like
said,
a yes.
do you have any data to support that what you're saying? Just for example,
Yes.
and the adjacent property will be exposed to less amount of water or something like that. Do you have like the?
Yeah, so the data for this
This-
particular project is a stormwater management report.
No,
that has
I'm
those
not asking
calculations.
for the specific and this project because this project hasn't.
Hasn't been built yet.
Yeah,
so that's what I'm saying.
but I'm saying that because at the beginning I said that this detention tank has been developed for a few years, right? And
They've
the
been in
people
use.
and your company probably has installed quite a bit.
Correct.
So do you have any data to support that what you're saying, like probably
Yes.
less amount of
We
water?
could provide you whatever data you would like, for this facility or other type facilities. Yes.
I'm talking about the adjacent, and the property and what is it like, what it will be the water, storm water and how much like, do you have the data to support that? Because you always mention that this detention tanks works like the best, but I'm not convinced.
The answer to your question is yes.
Yeah, so we're happy to provide you data.
No,
Certainly.
it's not
Just
asking
yes.
for data.
Just
The
yes.
answer
But
is
yes.
The answer is yes. We have
Yes.
data.
Can you show us?
It's in the stormwater report.
Okay.
Your borough engineer has reviewed the stormwater report and has agreed with the calculations. I don't know what more you can want us to do.
Because I asked a specific question.
We understand and the specific.
And
answer is
because
yes.
and
Specific
I
answer is yes.
as a council member, I have the right to ask you a question. And I may have some different, and ideas and with our, zoning office or something, and because I'm not expert in this field, I just ask a general question.
Answer is yes.
The experts in this field have reviewed the plan and have agreed with the calculations presented within the plan. There is no testimony on record. This isn't a hearing. No evidence provided from anybody else that the calculations as provided from Mr. Miller here are not accurate and that that there will be any adverse impacts down. Nothing in the record to reflect that. Simple as that.
Because your answer is not related to what I have asked. It's okay, and you can say whatever you want. It's fine. But I just ask a question I want to ask, and for not only for myself and also for the community.
He has plenty of stormwater detention tanks in use that he has data from to verify and validate his calculations that he presented for this proposed tank. That directly answers your question.
But listen, when I first asked this question, have you had any data to show or something? But your focus and didn't really give me the definite answer, right?
The direct answer is yes, he has detention tanks in practice that he uses to calculate the data that he represents will come from this tank that we are proposing. That directly answers your question, no?
That's okay.
Okay, any further discussion? Yeah.
Yeah, for your engineer, Mr. Tyson, right? Okay, so I think at the planning commission, you mentioned the 1 year, 5 year rates. So that's in the borough ordinance, those rates.
Correct. Yeah, the borough ordinance specifies what rates we use in our calculation.
Are those NOAA rates? Because I think you had mentioned that a lot of municipalities are going to NOAA.
Uh,
calculation standards.
I'll be honest, I don't recall off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure that the values here were NOAA, and in most cases, the NOAA rates are slightly higher than municipalities that have predetermined rates in their ordinance, only because NOAA is averaging those rainfall values over the last data set. So over the last couple of years that have been wetter, that is bumping those numbers up. So the NOAA numbers ultimately would be more conservative.
And we passed the Act 167 model ordinance that Allegheny County, we did it in 2008, the entire borough, even though we were in the corner. And then I think that was 2018.
18, yes.
Or so
All municipalities in Allegheny County have
Okay.
ratified that. Yeah,
So
so
we're
that's
using,
established.
we're using the more stringent NOAA rates.
Correct. Yes.
Anything further?
I'm good now.
No? Good. Okay, any further discussion? Okay.
Mr. Avon had
Oh,
I don't know if he wrote a comment or
He said he had to comment.
Now, Mr. Knox, is Mr. Avon still?
Jason.
He said he's.
Yes, Mr. President, he can unmute if you would give him the floor.
Okay.
Hello. Sorry I couldn't be there tonight. My wife had a concert to go to. She's got a performance with the Wheeling Symphony, so couldn't get a babysitter tonight, so I'm doing this remotely. So hope everyone is doing well. My name is Bernie Avon. I live at 2604 Lorik Lane. I am adjacent to where they will be releasing the water from the property. And I know Stephen Victor said this a couple times. He's explained that the pipe that runs underneath my property lets out on the other side of Lorik Lane somewhere. I don't know where this lets out. And the first question I have is, I know they did their stormwater analysis. They've done all their calculations. But was there a dye test executed to determine where the water goes? Or is this all assumption based on what they believe is underground under my property? And from what I can tell, and I don't know if Kathy will speak, but she was one of the original landowners back here for the 3 lots, and she's next to me further south. And what she's told me is that pipe is 33 years old. I don't think it's been inspected or looked at by the borough. And we're planning on dumping the entire stormwater runoff from Cardinal Ridge down to the back of Elsie's property. But I don't even know if we know 100% where the water's going to go. So I guess that would be my first question is, has there been a dye test?
If my car doesn't start in the morning, I know it's got a problem. How many years has Bernie been living there? And every time it rains, if that pipe wasn't working, that water would have backed up and gone over his yard. We've never heard testimony from him that that pipe's functionality is in question. So I don't know how to answer what he's talking about. It's by its own proof. It is working because it's not backing up and running over his front yard.
So no dye test is required. The U.S. Geological Society's topographic maps are what's generally used to determine which way the water flows from a property. That was used in this case, as is the requirement under your ordinances. To the extent that Mr. Avon's concerned about a pipe under his property, the fact of the matter is that would be his issue, not ours, because he and his predecessors in title are the one who installed that pipe in a natural drainage. So therefore, if the pipe is not adequate, it is then therefore in violation of the township stormwater management ordinance, and they would have to go in and fix it. As Steve's point said, we have no knowledge or belief that that is the case because it currently operates just fine. There's no issues there. So that directly answers your question, I believe, Mr. Avon, to which there is no dye test required, so none was performed. But as I said, geological maps dictate which way water flows, and that's what was referenced to figure out which way the water flows.
Oh, I don't know. When you go to buy a house and you test your sanitary and stuff, you have to do a dye test. Why can't you guys do a dye test to see where your stormwater is running? I know it's not sanitary and it's different, but I still think we should do a dye test because I don't think we know exactly where this water goes. And as far as the pipe is concerned, it's a private pipe. It was not installed by the borough. It was installed by the original owner, I believe his name was Casciotti, of my property, and the Woodworth family. Now, I have no idea where this pipe runs. I know where it opens up to. I know where you're dumping your water from. But what my concern is I think if we're going to use this as a main artery to dump your water from your stormwater further down so that you can do what you have just said with the engineer and everything, I think we need to be certain that this pipe is in good functioning order. And the fact that my driveway's been sinking, now look, I know I got to fix my driveway. And I know that with homes, everybody here who's a homeowner knows that there's always something to do with a home. But, you know, my driveway it appears it's being sunk. I don't know if it's from the pipe. It could just be because the driveway is in such disrepair that, you know, I need to dig it up and just redo it. I understand that. But, you know, I didn't have to worry about this to answer your question, I've been at my house for about 11 years. And no, I have not seen a problem with water running up on my property, but I don't think that the water is going where you say it is. I'm not 100% certain because I wasn't here when that thing was put in. I know there's a bunch of utilities that run across the front of my line, my yard. So, I mean, if you're saying it's my problem, that, you know, again, this goes back to what the councilman was saying. You know, they're looking at the greater picture here of all the citizens involved. You are going to impact me. You're going to increase my cost, whether it's now what could be like annual maintenance for me now becomes quarterly or monthly. I have to deal with it. And you guys get to go away. Steve, Victor, you get to go find another property, develop, and do another presentation with the borough. And I'm stuck with maintenance and issues that I didn't have before. So I think that, you know, we've talked about this, and I know you're where you stand on it, but is it that much difficulty to run a dye test to see where this water goes? We're not talking about a super expensive test here.
I think Mr. Avon can do his own test. It's pipes on his property. He's unsure. We know exactly where it goes. He's unsure.
Well, do you?
Yeah, we've represented where the water goes, and as Mr. Avon perfectly said, I couldn't have said it better myself. It is a man-made private improvement. Simple as that. It is a man-made obstruction of a natural drainage way that was put in by his predecessor in title. If there's an issue,
What are you talking about obstruction?
Mr. Avon, excuse me. If there is a problem with that, that is their duty. That is their duty fixed, because we have also represented that the rate of water and the amount of water that is going down this drainage way is going to be less from our development than it is currently.
All right, look, I'm sorry. I don't know why you're bringing my neighbor into this. What I'm talking about is the pipe that you guys say is there.
That you built, that your predecessor in title built.
There's no drawings. I mean, there's no right, I don't know. There's no right of way. I've pulled my title. I've looked at my plans. I've looked at everything. There's no documentation that says where this pipe goes.
There doesn't necessarily have to be. I mean, if your predecessor put it in because there was a stream there and they covered the stream, it's not like it's an easement going over somebody else's property. And I have to agree with Mr. Cosgrove on the comment that we aren't talking about private property issues, just like with Lorick Lane in terms of access to it. I mean, these are not, you know, requirements for the borough or even items for the borough to consider, because if that was the case, nothing would ever get developed anywhere, because you have to go too far down. That we can hold them to the requirement that they can't increase the amount of flow that's coming, you know, off of that site. That's why they have the stormwater facility to control and release it. But, you know, as we said before, we can't make them get easements all the way down to the river or otherwise. They can only deal with what's on their property. And Mr. Avon, your concerns, you know, about the condition of your driveway, that getting overloaded or inspected. We don't have a requirement in the ordinance to do a dye test, to do a soap test, unless we're dealing with sanitary sewers and potentially them being illegally discharged into storm sewers. So we heard your comment, and I think council can take it under advisement, but it is not.
Okay. Well, that kind of leads me to another question. You know, if we're not going to do a dye test, and let's say, you know, I don't know I don't think anybody can really say what exactly the stormwater is going to do. We've done calculations. The engineers have used the 100-year storm. It's all theory at the end of the day. You could have the 101-year storm next year. It could happen. So, like, I understand that you can't really build anything because you have to have requirements in place, and we use in engineering world, we use the 100-year term a lot, whether we're building bridges, you know, power plants, whatever. So I understand the technical side of this. That's not hard for me to grasp, but what I'm saying is that we don't know really what's going to happen until this is in. And it could improve the situation. The Johnston's backyard could be better off, like Mr. Victor has been saying. But what happens if that's not the case? And now the private citizen, like myself, Miss Woodworth lives next to me, the Johnston family, the Hollands, myself and Kathy, if something happens to Lork Lane, what happens if we have damage? Who do we sue? Is it the borough that's at fault here because they approved it? Or is it the developer that we have to file suit against? Or the current landowner after he sells it and walks away? Just a simple question.
Well, not too simple. All those rights and responsibilities. I mean, that's why we have private attorneys to go through. We can only say from the borough's perspective that we have an ordinance in place. If once construction is done, there are violations of the approved plan, we have remedies. If there are violations of these requirements, stormwater, et cetera, we have other enforcement means to pursue against a property owner in terms of any of that process. But I'll say the reason we have the stormwater management ordinance in the first place, the saldo in the second, zoning in the third is to minimize those risks by putting a review process where detailed calculations need to be presented, reviewed, recommended for approval, and then finally approved. And that's the extent of our authority.
So essentially then, this pipe that I never put in, that I never saw what was done when it was installed to make sure that it was actually installed properly, that you don't even know exactly where it is. If I have to dig it up and replace it, I have to deal with the utilities that run across the front of my property now and the extra communications cable that they brought in recently for 5G. So now I have to hire someone to come in and dig all this up if there's a problem, and I have to fix it myself. So we're basically, if what Victor is saying is accurate and they improve the water flow off of their property on the mine, maybe we won't have a problem. Great. But if he's wrong and we end up with a problem, the citizens are left holding the bag. That's what you're saying, correct?
No, I'm saying you have those responsibilities right now today. The water is flowing uncontrolled, through into that pipe. This plan controls that, should improve it. If there are consequences, the borough has remedies, and private property owners have remedies. That's all I can say in terms of any development that happens anywhere.
And Max, if I may jump in here too, I mean, we will sign the township standard SWOMA. So you will have a means of going in and ensuring that our stormwater management facilities are operating exactly as they should. We will also, have the inspection duties under your township, or excuse me, your borough stormwater management ordinance that we will have to comply with. So you have, it's not just you give us approval and you never see us again. You are reserving a lot of rights to be able to make sure and ensure that this operates as we've represented and as it should.
And that's recorded against the property. That's subject to any sale of the property. It is something that runs with the land, and it's something that should have been in place when this pipe went in originally, because then you would have a record of how it's controlled and covered. And done 50 years ago, that wasn't the standard, but it is now for this property.
All right, well, at least it's on the record. So there is means for the citizens to take steps to mitigate their damage. Thank you very much. I don't think I have any other comments at this time.
Thank you. I do have a curiosity question. On the detention tanks themselves that you show the picture of, are there perforations on the lower half, bottom half of that?
That is Tyson.
Actually, it's continuously perforated all the way around. So all
Okay,
360
so there
degrees
is-
have
there is
holes everywhere.
filtration that occurs in the tank. the
Correct.
Tanks themselves, okay.
Correct.
So
So
you may
there's
be releasing less water than originally anticipated.
Exactly. So yeah, there, as you can even see in the picture that, they fill the areas between the tanks with stone. That whole, both the pipes and the stone will fill up with water,
Okay.
and a portion of that will infiltrate into the ground.
Further,
Just a general question, the stormwater agreement that's gonna be executed here, right, as a part of this. I believe it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the planning commission was asked it, whatever the current stormwater standards are, right? So something like inspections, if the borough finds out like in 15 years from now, instead of having 3-year inspections, you should have 1-year inspections, right? Let's just say, storms are naturally getting more and more disastrous. Is that the understanding?
Yeah, if you were to change your stormwater management ordinance and change inspections, we would be obligated to comply with those because that's in your ordinance. The SWOMA doesn't set forth inspection standards. It sets forth your rights regarding maintenance and operation thereof. So if you were to change that, we would have to comply just like that. We're not grandfathered in or anything like that, which is arguably their line theoretically has stormwater management control and actually has inspection obligations with it too. So that's interesting, but I'm not going to get into that matter.
further discussion? I think we need a roll call vote.
Dr. Lee,
No.
Mr. Malcolm,
No.
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Opposed?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, with a 3-3 tie, similar to back in January, the mayor has the ability to break the tie. You can do so this evening under the Borough Code, or we can reschedule a special meeting within 5 to 10 days or so.
My vote is yes.
Okay, motion passes.
Very much, everybody. Good luck, and we'll next need to do the construction cost estimate. We'll do a development agreement. Then we'll have a lot of building permits to review.
Move. Just that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, move council, authorize the payment of bills which has been reviewed and approved since the last meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Mr. Yunker, would you take over the public hearing, please?
Certainly, we'll now go on the record. This is the date, time, and location for a conditional use public hearing on a conditional use application submitted by Borough Family YMCA for a property located at 2565 Nicholson Road in the R2 and M2 zoning districts. Assessment records show that the property is 12.733 acres. It is currently developed with a 2-story recreational building utilized as a YMCA. The property is owned by the borough and leased by the applicant. The application is for an accessory structure in excess of 1,000 square feet in order to build a 1,500 square foot pavilion on the field behind the existing building to provide outdoor space and shade for the summer day camp. On November 15th, 2022, the applicant obtained a variance from the zoning hearing board to construct a non-residential accessory structure in the R2 district at hearing number ZH 2211-11. The applicant has also applied for preliminary and final land development approval. This is application CU 22-09-04. It is blot and lock number 1345-S-100. The applicable zoning ordinance provision is section 212, dash 1907, accessory use regulations. Before we swear in witnesses and hear from the applicant, I do have a number of preliminary exhibits to enter into the public hearing record. Borough Exhibit A is the application received August 26, 2022. Borough Exhibit B is the text of section 212-1907. Borough Exhibit C is the text of section 212-1803 on general conditional use criteria. Borough Exhibit D is the public hearing proof of publication from February 26th and March 6th. Borough Exhibit E is the picture of the posting. Borough Exhibit F is the written consent to an extension of time to commence tonight's public hearing. Borough Exhibit G is the January 13th, 2023 staff report by Mr. Phillips. Borough Exhibit H is the January 17th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting minutes. Borough Exhibit I is the February 22nd, 2023 letter to the applicant informing them of the Planning Commission's recommendation and the scheduling of tonight's public hearing. Borough Exhibit J is the variance approval from the zoning hearing board at section or case number 22-11-11. At this time, we'd ask the applicant to come forward, and anybody else that may speak for or against this application will be sworn in. Double duty. Okay. We'll turn it over to the applicant. Is there anybody else in the audience that seeks party status for this public hearing? Seeing none, you may proceed with your presentation.
My first time. So we are
Can you
seeking.
please identify
Oh,
yourself?
I'm sorry. I'm Kathy Dibbs. I'm the executive director at the Borough Family YMCA. And we are seeking approval to build a 30 by 50 pavilion that we will use for our summer camp programs to provide shade. If you've ever been in the backyard of our building, there is zero shade there. So they bake in the sun all summer. And so that's the purpose of this. Oh, we have been there since May of 2006 as a partnership with the Borough of Franklin Park. And we are going to be there for another, let's see, our lease is 99 years. So I won't be here at the end, but hopefully we will. We've been doing, COVID really hurt us, but we're coming back and we're trying to serve the community the best we can. And we feel like this pavilion will be a great addition to our programming for kids.
Tyson Miller, KU Resources. I'm assisting the YMCA through this process. It's pretty straightforward as it was described. There is a small stormwater management system associated with the stormwater runoff for the pavilion. There's no additional parking demand required because these are students that were and kids that were already there as part of another program. This is just an amenity for them to use. We've received a couple of engineering letters. I believe that we pretty much have a clean letter. We have a stormwater management agreement under review. It's a little bit odd, I know, because in this case the owner is actually the borough themselves. So we're just waiting on whatever changes to the language might be necessary for that. But otherwise, I think again we've met the criteria of the ordinance for both the land development as well as the conditional use. So happy to answer any questions, but this one's pretty simple.
Okay. Thank you. Before we turn it over to members of council for any questions, Mr. Phillips, your staff report has 7 requirements. It's dated January 13th, 2023. Are these the proposed conditions for approval? Yes. And you've addressed hours of operation limitations from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. That's okay with the Y?
Yes.
Okay. And sufficient screening shall be provided to protect the neighborhood from inappropriate noise and other disturbance. As opposed to appropriate noise. Right. With that said, we'll start down. Mr. Schwartzmeyer, any questions for the applicant?
No, I drove over and looked at it last late in the afternoon, I drove by. It was kind of a cold, rainy winter day. Drove around the very back, and certainly you can't see this from Nicholson Road. The building completely blocks it back in there. I had no personal issues with it.
Dr. Lee?
Just simple question. So will it affect our usage of the vicinity? I'm saying vicinity. It just means the construction, or it cause some problem to like, for us to, I know what I'm saying that you're building something like near the main building, right? So, and what the construction effect, like the.
No,
And-
it's a little over 100 feet away.
Yeah, because I'm a member, so that's like what. Like,
Hopefully you'll have it.
the second question, and if it's approved, so how long the construction, it's probably not related to, it's just like how long this construction will take?
Joe Urban from Urban Construction Services. I'm the general contractor. Construction, approximately 2 months. It's a prefabricated, pre-engineered building. It's a shelter that's commonly placed in playgrounds and facilities like this. It should go up pretty quickly. And then we have a little bit of time doing the stormwater facilities that we also design as well. So 2 months total, approximately 60 days.
Yeah, thank you. No question. No more question.
Ms. Linsky?
Thank you, Mr. Yunker. My daughter loves the facility, so I was also there yesterday and I checked it out. It looks good to me.
Parks?
No question.
Malkin?
I guess just one, because there was this condition about the noise. There's no plans to have like loud concerts or anything like that going on in this thing. That's not what it's for. Yeah. That was all.
Valid.
Yeah, I was just looking at your sketches here and I just wanted to know, were there any alternatives to using concrete? Like, I'm thinking about stormwater and just impervious spaces. Is there anything out there?
Well, I mean, obviously it has a roof, right? I mean, that's one
Yeah.
of the purposes of having shade. So in terms of what you put underneath it, I think that's kind of irrelevant, because the roof is going to be what's intercepting the rain. So just from a maintenance and housekeeping perspective, obviously having concrete is much easier to clean than it being a dirt floor. So as I say, that's fairly common practice. And again, because the stormwater is being managed, there's really no adverse impact.
Cool. Yeah, no further questions.
Mr. Mayor?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Junior council member? All right. Well, thank you for the presentation. We'll stay on the record. Do I have a motion to close this public hearing?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Muslinski. Is there a second?
Second.
Properly moved by Mr. Malkin. I heard him first. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the public hearing is closed, but we will stay on the record for motion 6 and 7. Well, I might as well do both.
Motion 6, move to approve the revised conditional use application CU 220904 submitted by the Borough Family YMCA for the addition of a pavilion to be constructed on the property located at 2565 Nicholson Road in the R2 zoning district, contingent upon compliance with the building inspector / zoning officer staff report dated February 22nd, 2023.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Yunker, would you summarize resolution number 1325-2023?
Certainly, this is resolution number 1325 of 2023. It is a resolution of the Borough of Franklin Park, Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, granting preliminary and final land development approval to Borough Family YMCA for LPF 22-03-03 regarding the Borough Family YMCA Pavilion Plan with conditions.
Move to adopt resolution number 1325-2023. granting revised preliminary and final subdivision and land development approval to the Borough Family YMCA for the addition of a pavilion to be constructed on the property located at 2565 Nicholson Road in the R2 zoning district with conditions.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Now you
Now you can. So we're up. Record.
move the cash bond in the amount of $19,283 posted by Pole Construction, Inc. for the MAB gross plan of lots located at 2306 Rochester Road be reduced by $16,543, leaving a balance of $2,740 in accordance with the letter from Lennon Smith Solray Engineering, Inc. dated March 3rd, 2023.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move the borough ending to the first addendum to development agreement with Pole Construction Incorporation for the MB growth plan, a 3-lot subdivision located at 2306 Rochester Road in the R-2 zoning district.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to award Cronin Enterprises LLC of Imperial, PA, the bid for trucking services at a weekday rate of $99 per hour and an evening weekend rate of $109 per hour for the year 2023 with 2 possible option years.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to award the base bid contract number 23-R01 curb and gutter replacement program for the 2024 road paving program to Palumbo Contracting of Newcastle, Pennsylvania in the amount of $187,500, subject to Palumbo Contracting obtaining the required insurance and bonds and contingent upon review and approval of same by the borough solicitor prior to the execution of the agreement, and to consider by July 11th, 2023, the possible award of ad alternate number 1 and ad alternate number 2, subject to the review of the borough's budget, the receipt of the necessary permit from Allegheny County, or the successful bidder's written waiver of the time period for awarding alternates.
Second.
Any discussion?
New Kensington, not Newcastle.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to appoint Bima Badlam Murray to the Technology Advisory Committee for a 4-year term, which will expire December 31st, 2026.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to reapprove a subdivision application number SS-22-03-01 submitted by James Mermigers for the Mermic subdivision plan number 1, a minor subdivision to subdivide 1 lot into 2 lots at the property located at 2534-2536 Brad Scott Road in the R2 zoning district with all the conditions as set forth when the application was originally granted approval on March 16th, 2022.
Second.
And was there a second?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to hire.
Go ahead. Move to hire Ryan Dunn as a full-time police officer effective April 11th, 2023 at a rate of $37.78 per hour, pending successful completion of all required testing.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Move to
to-
authorize the purchase of a Greenmaster E-Triplex 3360 greens mower for Clover Hill Golf Course from EH Griffin Incorporated, Pittsburgh, PA 15218. Participant ID number 1137891 under Omnia National Contract number 2017025 at a cost of $68,203.20.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Move to,
Motion
move to authorize the purchase of a Procore 648S aerifier for the Clover Hill Golf Course from EH Griffith Incorporated of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 15218. Participant ID number 1137891 under the Omnia National Contract number 2017025 at a cost of $35,857.33.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to authorize the purchase of a Ventrac KJ 520 broom attachment for the Parks Department through EH Griffith Inc. of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 15218. Participant ID number 1137891 under Omnia National Contract number 2017025 at a cost of $5,816.80.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to acknowledge receipt of the Borough Engineer's letter dated March 8, 2023, recommending that the Borough deny the request for acceptance of the Squire Ridge 3 plan.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to acknowledge receipt of a Borough Engineers letter dated March 18th, 2023, and recommending that the Borough deny the request for acceptance of Willow Ridge plan.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to authorize the borough manager to continue with the class action claims process for the national opioid settlement.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Time for comments. Mr. Ebner.
No comments, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Yunker.
No more.
Mayor O'Keefe.
I do have a couple. I want to express appreciation. I know not just my part, but I'm part of the council for our volunteer fire company. We can rely on them. They're always there for us and they respond quickly. And it's something that's very vital to our borough. And if you've been listening to the news, some fire companies are not doing so well. As a matter of fact, the council at McKees Rocks last night decertified their fire company, their volunteer fire company, because of their inability to respond. And now they are picking up some fire protection from a neighboring community somewhere along the way. But we're just so fortunate to have our fire company that has been evolving for all these years, and having the volunteers, new volunteers, and family. We have, I think, 3 or 4 generations now of firefighters. Am I right, Reed? Yep. And so thanks so much for what they do for us. And I also want to offer congratulations to North Allegheny track and field coach John Neff. He is set to be inducted this May into the Pennsylvania High School Track and Field Hall of Fame. He guided North Allegheny girls to 5 straight cross-country wins and 3 straight boys championships. So congratulations to John Neff. I also want to congratulate our former junior councilperson, Jackie DiGiacomo, and her teammates. Allegheny girls track, that's where she goes down. She goes to Allegheny College. The Allegheny girls track and field of Allegheny College won their conference play at Youngstown State University on February 25th. They are now the presidents Athletic Conference 2023 Indoor Championships. Congratulations to Jackie when you see her. Okay. And finally, on March 2nd and 3rd, the North Allegheny girls basketball team and its boys and girls swimming team took home WPIAL championship trophy. So congratulations to, I covered a lot of sports tonight. So congratulations to everybody. That completes my reports, Mr. President. That completes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Powell.
No, just wanted to add on, I believe on April 29th, the EAC is sponsoring a cleanup like they did last year. Not sure where. Fun time, so feel free to show up.
Good deal. It's a good deal. Mr. Mount,
No more comments, thanks.
Mr. Meslinski.
Nothing from me except for happy St. Patrick's Day if you so.
For sure. Dr. Lee.
Yeah, good.
Okay, Tom, Mr. Schwartzmeyer,
No additional comments, Mr. President. Thank you.
Mr. Brett.
Nothing additional to our report.
Chief Healy. Mr. Buchanan.
Yes, I'd just like to let you know, again, it's Margaret site, we go to the park. You do need a permit to use the site. We also have a drop off area for heat pads, and we will be hauling in heat mulch first of the month, 1st of April, and 1st of April we will be doing our bus system. That's all.
So the leaf bags is in Blueberry down below, down in where the concrete blocks are, yeah. And the leaf mulch is free to all citizens, correct? Residents. Oh, Franklin Park, okay. Mr. Phillips. Mr. Brower. Mrs. Crane.
We didn't even
Apologize
notice.
to share. Oh,
Mr. Jamaka, did I forget you?
I don't have.
Yeah, that's the cards, okay. One more time, if there's anyone who would like to make additional public comments, you're welcome to do so. And hearing none, how about a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We are adjourned.